Welcome to The Law Matters. Of course it does. Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes, your host and moderator. This program, as we tell you, has been created to educate, inform, and help you with law matters because the law matters. Understand the law better, and you're in a better position to decide how to help yourself, your family, and your business. We continue to provide information and resources that will help you determine whether or not you might be able to handle some issues yourself. If you do, hopefully with this program, you'll be better prepared, and so will the professional you decide to consult with. Either way, our thoughts are that you will save time, money, and hopefully achieve the best possible results. So today, we're in the middle of summer, and summer for most of us means that it's a time for fun and relaxation for kids of all ages, as we say. And there's so many activities that are involved with summer fun that we thought we would cover a few, whether it's camps and vacations and barbecues and pool parties. And if you're an employer, perhaps you are offering some of these things to your employees. Or maybe even as an employer, you might be wanting to offer a young person some on-the-job training. All good ideas, but there are things that you need to know. So before you either head out the door for vacation or even make that seemingly kind and generous gesture, we're going to cover a few details, the law, discuss a few examples so that you're better prepared. We want to welcome and thank, as we usually do, David Bazar from the Bazar and Associates Law Firm in East Providence.
Thank you.
So David, there are so many kids who go away to camp. Before your child goes away to camp, what kinds of things do you think that you need to share with the camp or know about to protect yourself and your child? I'm thinking medical things,
well,
for
yeah,
example.
of course. Always, I would assume most camps that are very well run will actually have forms where they send things to you that they want you to share with them, allergies, medications, emergency contact information, any other special issues that they need to be aware of. So most camps, I'm sure, have already developed forms over the years that elicit all that information. But if the camp that you're using doesn't have something like that, then those are the types of things that they need to know, whether there's any special medications. Much like schools, camps have procedures that they have to follow in order to have the medication there and somebody who's able to administer it appropriately if your child needs medication during the day. Allergies, they need to know about those things, and we know what's happened with EpiPens and all of those things, but if that's an appropriate thing to have, that should be provided as well.
And the facility, before you actually send your child off to camp, maybe you've had a chance to visit it, hopefully. What kinds of things do you need to check out? Do you need to check out their insurance policy? And in view of what goes on, do you think you need to do a background check on every single camp counselor that your child may encounter? What's reasonable?
Well,
what should you do?
I would assume that the camp, much like a private school, would do their own background checks on folks that are working there. So there's going to be some responsibility from the camp to do that type of thing. So I don't think that it's necessary for you. If it's, I'm assuming that we're talking about a long-standing professional camp that has a reputation and a history of doing things the correct way. But it shouldn't be incumbent on you as the parent to do a background check on every employee of the camp. I don't even know how you would do that. But you should absolutely know that the camp has got a reputation for doing the things that they do, that they have coverage for certain insurance things that they think. I don't think you need to see their policies, but you might want to inquire to make sure that they're covered. Those are not unreasonable things to do. Not 100% sure they're always necessary, but peace of mind is a better thing than finding out afterwards that they didn't have what they needed.
Is a power of attorney needed when you're working with the camp and some medical treatment and some decisions need to be made, or you hopefully won't have that happen, but if it should happen, do you need to go that far?
I don't think you need a power of attorney. Many of the camps will have forms that you sign as part of the enrollment that allow them to provide the medication if you have that, if there's an emergency, to get emergency help. And in an emergency, the doctors and nurses are going to do what they need to do anyway. And there should be, like I said at the beginning, contact information so that if something happens, you're immediately notified so that as the parent you can get to wherever you need to be as quickly as possible.
Sounds right. And in the past, during the holidays, we've talked about social hosting laws. Similarly, in the summer, whether, I suppose the post-high school graduation parties have passed, but pre-college going
Right.
away parties or whatever, when those things are being done and you want to host a party and the underage child and the of-age child says, Dad, I want you to get a keg. You have kids who are underage, some who are adults. What do you do? How do you handle it?
So you have two different situations that you can lay out there. One is there is absolute liability, criminally speaking and civilly speaking, for serving alcohol to a minor, providing alcohol to a minor, allowing minors, by minors I mean underage people, to be able to drink on your property. There are some loopholes that have been closed in those things, such as it used to be in Rhode Island that in some instances they could be drinking on the property but not in the house, and there was a loophole that said, well, that's not something that you're liable for. That's been closed. It is. So there are a number of ways you can get yourself into some trouble by serving alcohol to minors, and it's not ever a good idea. Providing it's the same as serving it. Allowing it to happen is the same as providing it. So you can't do any of those things. You also mentioned, and we can talk about social host liability if it exists, for having a party and having someone come to that who is not under the drinking age, the legal age, and gets drunk and injures themselves or someone else after the party. And for the most part, the law in Rhode Island civilly, there's no criminal remedies for that. No charges can be brought that I know of. But if somebody hurts somebody else, can they sue you for over serving them or doing that type of thing? And the law in Rhode Island has pretty much been no, you can't. If it's a minor you serve and they hurt someone, there's some negligence involved in that where there can be liability, but to serve another adult, at least the thinking of the courts has been they're legally responsible for their own actions as an adult, and their insurance has to pay, and they're responsible for what they've done and not done. That is going to erode, I think, and change, and the court in one of the cases invited the legislature to look at that again. So social hosting on that level, it's really still a good idea to use common sense, to monitor what your guests are doing, and to try to get them to act appropriately. You can never be wrong by doing the right thing.
Sounds good. And while this isn't a show about insurance specifically, when you're doing this kind of hosting of a party, do you have to double check what that personal umbrella liability is? Because something could happen. Maybe it's not because of drinking, but someone does a triple gainer off your swimming pool diving board or whatever.
Yeah. So I'll give you a personal example. My wife and I had a wedding for a daughter at our home, and there was a tent that was put up. And the tent company is a very well-known professional tent company, and I'm sure it was going to be done perfectly. But I was a little concerned because part of the floor of the tent was over a cliff. And so
oh my.
I knew they had insurance, and I knew they would be primarily responsible. They put it up, and I knew we had insurance. But because it was a special event, I wanted to make sure there was coverage. And in fact, I had have an umbrella, but I also got an additional one just to be sure.
For that one day?
For that one day. Yeah. And I think it gave me peace of mind and my wife peace of mind. And it was totally, as it turns out, of course, and as you would hope, unnecessary. But it was definitely necessary because it did provide some peace of mind. And like I said, the tent company was absolutely professional, knew absolutely what they were doing, but I had concerns. And so that's what I did.
Can never be too cautious, I guess.
I don't think so, not in that instance.
So if you are having a family reunion, not speaking about pools now, but you have adult children who are at the party and they have an encounter with grandma who happens to say that someone was given a power of attorney and is managing her finances right now, and she says, gee, John, I just don't know where all my money's going. What is the reasonable right thing to do? Not to overreact, but what's the reasonable right thing to do considering there might be an issue there?
Well, So we'd have that concern whether it was at the party and grandma was sitting too close to the pool or whatever was going on. So you always have to, you're sort of talking about a situation which could be called elder abuse, and if someone is taking advantage of grandma and grandma has money that's missing, or at least thinks she does, absolutely the right family members who would be responsible for that need to know, unless they're the ones who are causing the problem.
The perpetrator.
Right. And so you would start with whoever is the appropriate person to sit down with grandma. Well, let's go through everything and look, because maybe grandma is a little confused and doesn't know, or maybe she's 100% correct and something else is going on. And you can always contact the state, the Department of Elderly Affairs, perhaps if there's some criminal action, the Attorney General's office or the police department. But grandma is entitled to be protected and enjoy her later years. And so as a concerned grandchild, if that's where we're talking in this situation, you should absolutely sit with grandma and talk to her and go through the things and have whoever else is appropriate there to do it with you.
So speaking to that situation, which is that it was just a family reunion and not something that was a family meeting per se, and someone just stumbles on this because grandma starts to say it. From a practical standpoint, is that party the time and the place to say, well, grandma, is it Mike who's handling that? Should we get him over here and have a discussion right now? Or should that just be, let's save that for another day and get grandma later? And
yeah.
How does that work out at the practical?
As a practical matter, it seems to me that's something best left for another day. You're there to enjoy the summer, which we know goes way too fast. And the appropriate time and place is probably some other place. Now, there are extenuating circumstances where it may be that that's the time and place, because
and the only time
it's going to happen. So, but for the most part, you would think that it's not the time and place.
That's a good tip. So if the family is together after kids have been away at school, you're planning a family vacation, maybe you have some kids who've been away at college, everyone decides that on this particular week, 2 weeks, we're all going to go away together. If everyone's leaving the house, what documents does everyone have to have? Or are there documents that we need to be worried about before we pack our bags in the van?
Depends where you're going.
Okay.
So if you're going, obviously, out of the country, we all know you need your passports. And it's interesting, as you know, some of these things have changed over time, and it used to be you could go to Canada and come back, and I don't believe for a long time that a passport was necessary for that. Driver's license, identification, that type of thing. Now it's a passport, as far as I understand it. So it depends where you're going. If you're driving, obviously you need a driver's license. I think you should probably have other forms of ID if you need them for something else. But most importantly, it's a twofold question, I think. It's what do you take and what do you do to protect what you've left behind? So obviously, if you're going with the need to have credit cards and money and all of that, you're going to take that. And what you probably don't want to do is leave money and that type of thing at home. Maybe if you have a safe deposit box and you've got nice jewelry and money, you want to lock that up. Maybe you want to take other precautions to have someone look after your house for you, turn the alarm on if you have one before you leave, and just check on things for you.
Do you think that if you had the whole of your family together, suppose something catastrophic happened, that mom and dad are incapacitated or gone or whatever, 1 or 2 children are surviving? I mean, these are worst case scenarios, obviously, that are that are being presented here, but do you need to make sure that the lawyer who has your will and your estate trust or whatever, someone who's available to know what to do in case all of you, except for one, is unavailable any longer?
So,
how do you cover the bases with that?
Usually,
broad
what you've done, because you're a good planner and you take care of things, and you've done this when your children were born and you wanted to make sure everything was covered, you did your estate plan, and your estate plan had your will and your power of attorney and your health care power of attorney, and you've named people as executor and the agent in your power of attorney, your attorney in fact, and you've named someone in your healthcare power of attorney to make those decisions for you, and hopefully they're not all with you. So if you have one of those people that stayed at home, that's either not a relative, but they're just somebody that you trust and have named in these capacities, you might want to tell them where all those documents are in case they ever need them while you're away and if something like you're suggesting happened.
Good to know. So while we've been focusing on the family and kids, how about, since you're a good employer, let's help out the employers too. As an employer, maybe you're going to be hosting some of these barbecues and parties and pool parties, and there are the issues about alcohol and who's behaving or misbehaving. What are the rules we should consider and laws that we have to be aware of now? Okay,
so we have our employer of a fairly mid-sized company, and we're going to have an outing. So the advice I would give to that employer is have the outing somewhere where somebody already has a liquor license and has dram shop liability insurance, and will assume the liability for doing whatever it is that's done in case something doesn't turn out the way it should by over-serving alcohol or something of that nature. What we've gotten away from, and we talked about this at the Christmas time, Christmas parties and holiday parties and those type of things, is the more you can do with other professionals who are responsible for what's going on, being responsible for that, the less liability you're likely to have. Now, workers' compensation can still be an issue. It can be a very interesting issue. Is it a mandatory party? Does everyone have to attend, or is it voluntary and you don't have to go? And is there any benefit to the company for people going? Is it a workers' comp issue if someone gets hurt? Good question. Depends on the situation.
So let's assume this mid-sized company has an HR handbook. Before you say, here's the good news, we're having a party, here's the bad news, everybody better read the HR handbook and know what you can and cannot do. I don't think that people are going to be even wanting to go to that party if that's the case. But I guess we glean from this that you as the employer or as the counselor to an employer might say, have it at a commercial establishment. I know you're kind, you've got a great home, but don't do it there just in case. That makes sense.
That's what I would recommend. Or if you do it at your home, have it catered by a professional who you know has the same coverage that is necessary and that they'll be responsible.
And what about at parties? People are more sociable, and perhaps their guard and perhaps their sense of what's appropriate is very different. Maybe there's more of an opportunity then for sexual harassment or even someone just misbehaving that causes other issues. How do you address that before you have a problem?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure you can address it before it happens because you don't know what's going to happen or what's going to happen.
You can't read that HR handbook.
Yeah, well, the HR handbook's there. So it's already, to me, presumed that when someone was hired, they read it. So you would assume that anyone who's been hired and has read it knows what's in it and is bound by what's in it. So I think that's already done. The issue as to what you do about it after it happens is the same, I would say, as if it happened at work and you became aware of it. You treat it the same way. It's not as if you can say, well, this was a off-site issue and party and we're not responsible. It's sponsored by the company, so you should take the same responsibility that you would as if it happened at work and treat it the same as you would and follow all the same procedures that you would as if it happened at work.
I'm thinking that you can't reasonably say, we're having a pool party, but no one can wear a bathing suit because, of course, that prompts or elicits bad behavior. It's just inappropriate. Also, even if you, back to having it at a commercial site, you're a generous employer, you'd like to have an open bar. Are you in a better place to say, let's not have an open bar, maybe we'll ticket each person so that everyone can have 2 drinks or whatever, but at least you're making a concerted effort to avoid overindulgence. So does it matter or not if you're at a commercial place?
I think it helps, but if you're at a commercial place, they're still responsible, even if there's no other controls on it, to try to make sure that people act reasonably and that they monitor if someone's drinking too much, they stop serving them. If somebody's acting inappropriately, they take the appropriate action not to let them drive or whatever it is. That would be commercially reasonable for the person who's providing the service.
Okay, and if we're not talking about alcohol, how about just the fact that parties and outings for a company are great team building experiences and supposed to be very sociable and fun, so you decide that you're going to have a basketball game or a softball game, and anyone who'd like to play, here you go. What happens when there's the knee-wrenching experience or someone gets hit in the eye with the softball or whatever? What happens then?
Yeah, it becomes a very good question, and it's very fact-driven, and a lot of facts that would go into it are, again, is it required? Because it is a team-building practice or type of activity, and we're doing it sort of as a mandatory function for everyone to go to, because this is part of how we're going to make our company better. And by making our company better, there's a benefit to the company, and therefore that knee injury could become workers' compensation, as opposed to we're just having a fun outing. Nobody has to come. Come if you want, don't come if you want, participate if you want, don't. Probably less likely to be workers' comp under those circumstances.
So if you're having such a party, should you be making sure that you say, none of this is obligatory, hope you'll all come, it'll be lots of fun, even if your plan is hopefully to do a little team building? Better to advise everyone unilaterally so that it prevents that situation that you're describing?
Yeah, but even actions speak louder than words.
Okay.
So even if you do that, but people know, well, you're saying that, but you don't really mean that, maybe it helps in front of a judge, maybe it doesn't. But
okay.
I think the most important thing is you run your company the way you think your company should be run. Make good decisions. And if we are doing some outing and it's really part of team building, then it's part of team building. You take the risk and you have insurance, workers' compensation insurance in place to cover something that may happen, and you hope it doesn't.
Thinking about your wedding, and you decided to do a special one-day event, additional rider or insurance.
Yeah, umbrella.
Is that advisable for the companies too? Is that worthwhile for them to do?
It may be. I'm not sure what would be covered and what wouldn't, whether it's just negligence or workers' comp or whatever, but that's what insurance agents are for, so call your agent.
That sounds right.
The agent will be happy about that.
I'm sure. So as an employer, you think it might be a good idea to help some young person with a little OJT. Two scenarios. One is it's a high school student or someone's getting ready to go to college. Another one, it's your kid. You'd like free labor in exchange for the fact that you're going to be spending some time, and it's going to take commitment on your part to work with them. What are the rules about that? Are there any that say, yes, you can have a younger person working, but you must pay them? What's the rules?
Well, it's an interesting question. If it's an internship, and the internship is an unpaid internship, through a school where they might be getting credit through college for that.
Yes.
I'm sure those programs are absolutely fine, and you can do that, and there's no requirement to pay because they're getting some benefit for them.
Yes.
If it's not through a program like that, then I think there are other rules that would have to apply, like you can't require them to come in. It's more voluntary on their part, and obviously if they want to impress you, it's something that they're going to want to do, but you can reach an agreement where there's benefits that are going back and forth for both people, but you have to follow the rules of what makes someone an employee, and therefore you're required to pay them, and what makes somebody sort of a volunteer.
And do you have to worry about them being injured on the job too? Are they part of workers' comp, but they're really not employees, so how does that work?
Yeah, so, you know, the only people who are covered under your workers' comp are employees. So you could have independent contractors doing work for you. 1099, no taxes taken out, you don't control what they're doing, you don't require them to work certain hours, or they bring their own tools, the things that would indicate that someone is truly an independent contractor, not covered by your workers' comp. Probably an unpaid intern could fall into the same category, because I was talking about the same types of requirements of not telling them, these are your hours, you have to work these hours, if you don't work these hours, what are we going to do, dock your pay? No, there is none. So it's this, I think, the same type of situation where they probably would not fall under workers' comp.
And because you have other employees, might they feel either threatened or perhaps feel that their hours might be reduced, or they don't have the opportunity to have overtime because now that summer intern or that unpaid person is on your summer staff. Is there any legal issue about that?
No. In most companies, I see the employees welcome some additional help for things, for projects that they might be able to help with.
Okay, and what about your child? I guess you're never obliged to pay them. Maybe he gets an allowance some other way, or she gets an allowance some other way. What are the rules for putting your child on the payroll? Are there any?
Well, it's interesting. There are some, and there are actually some that say you can't pay your child too much, because then it's looked at as, are you really trying to put some of your income to the child?
Yes.
And avoid paying at a higher rate that way, so the money then gets attributed back.
Yes.
I'm not an accountant, so I won't go into all of those things.
But you raised the right issue. That is a good question.
It is an issue. And the other issue is, if you don't put them on the payroll, well, if you do want to put them on the payroll as well, how old are they? Do you have these child labor law rules and everything else that you have to follow? And if it was my father, he would say, you do this because you're part of the family, and I did everything from sweeping the floor to cleaning the bathrooms, and so will you.
That's good. And is there an issue about when you're paying a child about their tax issue? I mean, this isn't an accountant issue, but do you have to do some withholding and all the rest as if they are?
Same rules apply to anybody who's on the payroll. So you have to pay payroll taxes, and they have to have withholdings at an appropriate level, and all the same rules apply as if it were any other employee, part-time job, summer employee, whatever.
Would you know if there's an option for that child's pay to just go into a Roth IRA? I mean, you're paying taxes because Roth is an after-tax instrument. Can you just, as the parents, say, you're not getting that money, child, it's all going into your retirement in another 60 years.
So what can a parent make a child do? I think there are some limitations, and I don't want to be at the table at dinner when those two are talking about what's going to happen.
What's going to happen with that money? We'll give you an allowance. It's all going into savings otherwise.
Yeah.
Well, we hope that some of these issues have been helpful to you. We hope that you have nothing but summer fun. Along the way, we also ask you from time to time to think about what issues will matter to you. You can send your suggestions or questions to thelawmatters@gmail.com. Others have sent in questions, and we've hoped that we've answered them and helped others answer them today. We will look forward to having you have a good rest of the summer, and we will be tuning in next week with additional issues, and we hope that you will join us. Stay tuned to The Law Matters, because, of course, as we tell you always, it matters to you.